I could be wrong, but I think probably the most famous scientists within last century or so, if you say tell me the name of a scientist, probably Albert Einstein would pop up in the top three at least, if not the top one. Everybody knows what he looks like, right? Weird hair, big mustache. Looks like a typical rocket scientist, physicist, but actually we get that image from Einstein. But he started his work in the early 20th century, the first years. He really became famous, though, in 1919. That's where the popular culture fame started up. And it was a result of the Eddington experiment. So, as you probably learned in Science 101, whatever it was, science, we have, trying to understand the physical world, and we have hypotheses. There's sort of this theory, but it's just theory until then we have to go out into the real world and we have to do experiments to see if it really works, if it's really true in the real world. So Einstein was, again, one of the originators of the theory of relativity, right? The modern physics is all about this. And again, brilliant man, had these ideas, had these theories, but they weren't proven until the Eddington experiment. So in 1919, two British astronomers, Arthur Eddington and Frank Dyson, they headed off to the southern hemisphere, where there was going to be a solar eclipse, because they had an idea of an experiment that could test the truth of general relativity. So one of the ideas that Einstein and others came up with was that light is going to be bent and affected and impacted by gravity. And so the idea was that the moon would shield the sun, and therefore we're going to test to see whether the sun's gravitational field bends the light of the stars to skim right, the light just skims right across that sphere of the sun towards Earth. And so we would measure distance between two stars before the sun was anywhere near, and then during the solar eclipse, as the sun was shielded by the moon, we would remeasure those little beams of light from those stars right next to that star, that's the sun, and see if they move, if there's any difference in the location in the star field. I think I got that right. More or less, that's what it was. Anyway, it was an important experiment. Anyway, it worked. There was a small deviation in the location of the stars, depending upon whether the light from them had to go past the sun, skim the sun, or not. Giving, again, proof that in the physical world, gravity was affecting the path of light. Okay. The newspapers picked that up, and they said, this is a genius guy. And from that point on, Einstein's fame took off. So anyway, what does that have to do with anything for a sermon? Now, I was thinking about the Eddington experiment because I wanted to think of the whole idea of experiments. And that was one of the famous ones of the 20th century. And because it brings me, is here we had the physicists wanting to test out how the real world worked. And I was thinking about that in terms of an experiment. It brings me to the Los Angeles Dodgers affair. Remember that just a couple days ago. For those who are unaware of what happened, the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team decided to celebrate, it's June, to celebrate the LGBTQ community by giving awards to different groups in this movement on last Friday. That would not have been very controversial, right, these days. Except that one of the groups was a group of drag queens who dress up in nuns' habits, and I guess they do some charity work, but their main reason for existing is to, frankly, mock and denigrate Catholic sacraments, morals, customs, etc. So when word got out that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence were one of the groups being given this award, the Archbishop of Los Angeles, other Catholics, began to protest. Not because there was going to be an LGBTQ night, but they wanted to know why this anti-Catholic group was part of the plan. So the Dodgers front office backed down in the face of this protest and rescinded the invitation to the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. But that just created the opposite effect. When the LGBTQ community in turn blew up, and now we're saying the Dodgers were caving in to haters and bigots, etc., and the Dodgers leadership was caught between two forces. They couldn't please them both. They were in a lose-lose situation. And that brings me back to the Eddington experiment. So yes, I'm disgusted with the perpetual indulgence sisters' antics, but I actually find this fiasco to be very useful, because I think it's a perfect experiment if you have a sort of a sense of, are Catholics is there a prejudice growing? Do we seem to be not in good favor, etc.? If somebody were to say, yeah, I think that there's, again, prejudice or anti-Catholic feelings that are growing, how would you test that? What experiment would you have to discover or reveal how much we matter to the people in power, to the powerful people in our society? How would we test that? So the protests from both sides forced the leadership of Dodgers to choose one or the other. And as I said, again, their foolishness had kind of gotten them into a corner they couldn't wiggle out of. And I imagine there were some sharp words as to who got them in there among the C-suites of the Dodger headquarters. Regardless. So the Dodgers chose to come down on the side of the anti-Catholic group rather than the Catholics. Now, and they even apologized to the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. They kind of promised they'd be more sensitive. They'd learn how to be more sensitive to them, kind of a grovel. Now, this was a clear case of mockery, and if you wanted to use those kind of terms, hate speech being directed against Catholics, but it didn't matter. Now, let's be clear, probably after 3 flip-flops, this wasn't a matter of principle at this point. I mean, obviously they were just looking, what's the least bad thing to do? But that's also very instructive. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and their allies have the real power. They're powerful, these anti-Catholic, these Catholic people, they're not. So if I have to weigh, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me at this point, just what's going to be the easiest for me, I'm going to come down on the side of the sisters. Which now means, again, the experiment revealed that the proof, and gave us proof, from the real world, that Catholics are officially mockable in the sense that you can offend and denigrate us and still, might even say therefore, be considered virtuous by the powers that be. It's okay, we're not under the protection of the rules. That's what we're saying. And this is very helpful for us Catholics. Now it's bad, but it's helpful. Because we can't pretend we don't know where we stand now. If you're looking, I call this the Dodgers experiment, not anything but the Dodgers. If you're looking at the Dodgers experiment, we know where we stand. We live in a society that's increasingly anti-Catholic. We have some proof of that. And we can expect it to get worse. But at least we have a clear understanding that it's going to cost us to remain faithful. Thanks to the Dodgers, we know the score. By the way, they lost 15-0 that night. The worst shutout loss in Dodgers history going back to 1898. So I guess there's a little experiment right there. Now, in our gospel today, Jesus is looking out over the crowds, and his heart is moved with pity for them because they were troubled and abandoned like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest." So what I find interesting in this situation here is a little point that Jesus is looking at these people and he sees that they're suffering. They are troubled and they are abandoned, they are leaderless. But at the same time, he sees great possibility here. The field is ripe for harvest. There's abundant possibilities here. It's this wonderful reality. So it's both and that's our situation. That's the situation all the time, but certainly in our situation and any human beings in the world. We're both and. I would doubt that many looking around today would say things are going well. Things are really going well in the world. They're going great in our country. The church is in a golden age. I don't think that's where we're at. Again, that idea, Jesus looking out and he's seeing these sheep lost, they're troubled, they're abandoned. And yet, Jesus sees an opportunity for abundant harvest here, right now. And he's calling for laborers to work in the fields. Now, it's true, today's gospel points out particularly the apostles. He sends them and equips them to go out there with his gospel. But he doesn't say this is only for the ordained. He doesn't limit his call for workers to those who are bishops or priests or nuns or whatever. Jesus calls for all of us. And that strikes me that today is the civil calendar. Civil calendar, this is Father's Day. So I particularly want to talk to fathers and challenge fathers today. Christ is calling you in this gospel. He's calling you to spiritual leadership, to be shepherds of the family. It's your job to encourage family prayer, setting the right priorities in life, protecting your kids from spiritual dangers, physical that matter. See that your family receives the Eucharist each day, each week. I think sometimes in our society, we don't put that on fathers enough, or we don't expect it enough, or we don't respect them enough for that. I think so oftentimes the religious things in our society are for moms and wives and things. Sure, obviously they have a role. But fathers, where are we? So I include myself, right? I'm a spiritual father. You call me father. There's a reason. Now, I think we underestimate the power of father's spiritual leadership in the family and in society. So I'm preaching to the choir because you're here. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for being Mass today and by leading by example. And keep it up. More, please. We're in a time of great challenges. See the Dodgers experiment. We have a little proof there in the real world. That the rules are changing. Things are slipping. I mean, this would not have happened 20 years ago. That dynamic would not have been the same there. Things are changing. And I would simply say, in Jesus' eyes, that just means greater opportunity to glorify him. This is the both and, bad news, good news, threat, opportunity. It's always there. Because the loss of power always purifies the church. We're losing power, thank goodness. We're born for these times. This is our age. This is the time of sifting out. Again, the world's shaking us. And some of us are going to fall and leave, and some of us are going to remain and grow in holiness and faith, become saints. Each one, and it's going to happen very quickly now. I think increasingly, the speed's going to come where we're going to lose faith quickly, more rapidly, or we're going to become holier and more faithful because of what's going on. And so I would simply let each one of us ask ourselves, which one is that? What's it going to be for me? Am I going to fall away, or am I going to grow in my faith?